Hey everybody, Dave Putz here from JKP Holdings. Alongside me, Mr. Nathan Turner.
Good day.
Good day, my man. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Hopefully my computer echoing days are over. Um, we'll see what happens. So it's interesting to say that we've had a lot of awesome guests on in the past months now.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that for me, I miss the days of networking live. And these are people that we consider friends, people that we respect, we learn from, um, we understand. But we always can learn from them, which is cool. Um, I hate to say I have a favorite, but I
yeah,
think
me
it's
too.
those people who I learn the most from, I respect the most. It's not being a
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah.
Um, what's your
I tell
thought?
my wife years ago when we first started going to conferences, and I came home and I said, it is so refreshing to be in a room full of people who know what the heck I'm talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you. That
When I say
whole
anything, then they're like, "Oh yeah," then I do this and that, and I'm like, "Oh, they know we're on the same page here. Like we understand what we're saying to each other. It's quite refreshing."
it's funny you say that because we our wives care about what we do, but they don't, right? They and the
Yeah,
people around us really want to be in the room with us to understand what we're talking about. But there's sometimes where you just get tired of sharing that story over and over again.
yeah,
But you enjoy it just as much, but being around people who you feel is someone you look up to or even look aside to is refreshing, right? I'm looking
yeah,
forward to it. We have a
yeah.
bunch of conferences coming up this year that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, this
Um,
fall is looking good.
oh my God. So we're going to try figuring out what ones we're going to go to, which one we're not going to go to. But it's going to be quite interesting come this fall, what is going to happen where. With
Yeah.
that said, we've had some awesome guests on that shared just things that I don't think we would have learned if we just kept doing what we did for the last couple years.
No, that's it. That's it. In fact, just recently, you and I both had a tape shown to us, and I don't know that it's going to work out, but it's an interesting tape, and
Different
it's an
angle.
interesting, yeah, different angle that they want to take on it. But that was from a guest that we had here on the
Yeah.
show,
And just
and
because of networking.
we wouldn't have met otherwise. So it's been very helpful and useful.
Yeah. You know, and it's, we always say, I don't care. I'll talk to anyone about the sport, the investing, and I don't care how long they've been doing it because we can learn from each other all different metrics.
Yeah,
You doing a deal gives me the opportunity to learn from you what your experience was, what struggles you had, what positive things you had.
yeah.
We say it all the time. There's things that you can learn in your first deal that we've never interacted with, and we can learn from.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Every deal is different. It would be great if every deal was exactly the same and you just plug it into a formula, but it's just not. Every deal is different. People are different. Their
Oh,
situations are different. And it's always going to be a new and interesting twist on kind of the core business.
we had a spreadsheet out projecting out how fast our money's going to grow if we double our money every 8 months. 2011, it was awesome, exciting. No, doesn't always happen that way. You get at
No.
one bubble, like, whoa, what did I do? How do I do that?
Yeah.
So, when you first get started, you have the excitement. Some people know that they don't know everything. Some people go crazy and get involved
Mm.
and buy 10, 15 deals. Um, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's interesting when you first get started going to conferences. Do you remember when you got to your first conference, what you felt like? What were you feeling like?
So my very first note conference was noteworthy back in, I think it's either 2009 or 10. And it was down in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, and so that was exciting just in itself.
Yeah.
But I get in there and stuff that me and my old partner Corey had been working on. We kind of thought we'd invented it. We didn't know anything about it. We were just kind of making it up as we go along. And then we got to the conference, and everybody knew what we were talking about, and we're doing it so much better than we were. And so it was just a huge
Yeah.
realization that this was a bigger world than we knew of. It's still a relatively small world, but there were different ways of doing it and different ways of looking at it, and just all kinds of different and new ways of looking at it that we hadn't thought of yet. So that was exciting.
You come as an expert and realize that you're not, right?
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah,
it was great.
I remember going, I think one of my first conferences was in Jersey, and I got the privilege of being backstage and talking to people, and the nervousness of talking to somebody that I didn't know about something that I didn't know much about. And you do what we see all the time at conferences. You kind of hang on the outside of that circle. And you kind of like listen in, right? And we know now, if we see someone outside, come on in, get in here, jump in, because, and there's some people who'll push away. But when you first started, that nervousness of, I don't belong. Yeah. But this space doesn't have a lot of that.
No, and that was the other thing that I found really refreshing. Like, for example, I remember that very first conference. It was actually Martin Granoff was one of the speakers, and he was talking about structured settlements. And so it's note related. It's a bit of a different twist on notes, but same idea.
Yep.
And it just kind of opened my mind and went, oh, there's different ways of doing this. And I went and talked to him afterwards, and I was really surprised. He's one of the speakers, he's one of the experts, one of the, the big guys on campus, and he was just so open and friendly and willing to talk, and it was fantastic. And and that was just kind of, I found that over and over and over again, that anybody I talk to is just totally open. And
it's amazing, because you go to any other conferences out there, that doesn't get the same vibe. And I think once you realize that you have the ability to sit down with anyone next to them and start talking to them. The big time to talk most time is lunch, right? Because everyone kind of sits in different seats, and we always encourage you. I'll walk around and sit at a table I know no one at. Because me sitting next to Nathan, that's pointless, right? I want to sit next to people I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes it turns out good. Sometimes it doesn't turn out so good.
No, same thing. I'll specifically go to a table where I don't know anybody, like maybe one other person, but that's it. Like I try to, reach out, and listen, it's totally uncomfortable. I'm shy, and I don't love being the center of attention, but, and networking is not tons of fun, but listen, it's part of the deal. It's part of the business. You've got to just talk to people, and you find out so many things by talking to different people. It's well worth it.
And I've talked to some beginners who say, listen, I'm in a series, I'm in a mentorship, I'm in this, I'm all good. And I tell them, you can learn from everybody in the space.
Yeah.
Learning from one person is great, but you need to learn different aspects. One of the guys we had in our group last night is part of a bigger group. Nathan, ready to say, are you shy? But we had a person in the group that is with another larger person, and they were amazed that they've been taking that series for so long, and they didn't learn some of the stuff we just talked about last night. And I'm not saying that series is wrong. We just have a different angle at it. You can learn something from everybody.
Yeah.
How did you first come across notes?
It's so funny.
Hey, fellow note investor. Are you looking to learn the basics of note investing so you can get started? However, you don't want to spend a few hundreds or thousands of dollars and hours online on some training program? Have you thought about attending a notes conference? However, you don't want to spend the money or the time away from your family. Well, we have a tremendous beginners video series of 20 different topics, with each video being less than 15 minutes. This means each video is less fluff and direct to the content. Visit www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series to learn more. Again, www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series.
When you start going back and you're looking back at and how everything kind of fell into place, you go, that's an interesting progression. So I started actually in real estate, like I think probably most people do that come into the space. But I was flipping houses in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, on the other side of the country from me. I had heard from a friend that, actually not a friend at the time, but anyway, I had heard that the real estate market was really hot out there. This was in 2006, 5, 6, somewhere in
You're
there.
in Canada.
Yeah. And so I had just heard kind of a random comment from somebody, and I went, really? And so I have a friend who lives in Saskatoon, so I called. And if anybody knows Saskatoon, like it's like 250,000 people. That's it. That's the city.
Wow.
My dad was born there, and so we had visited once when I was a kid. It's in the middle of prairies, and there's nothing around it. Nothing. Grain and more grain and more grain. You go north, you get potash. Like there's really nothing there. But I'd heard it's going nuts out there, and I'm like, really?
Yeah. What?
Saskatoon? I've been there. Okay. So I made the call, and he confirmed it. He said, yeah, it's going crazy. He said, like, house prices are just going up and up and up. So I had it in my head that I could start flipping houses. So I did. I went over and started buying properties sight unseen. I had a realtor I was working with out there. I would make a kind of a preliminary, estimate on what kind of work I was going to do. I packed up a sleeping bag and a suitcase full of tools.
Wow.
And I went out there. Yeah, I flew out there and I'd sleep on the floor, work 14 hours a day, and just go nuts and just do whatever I could to it. And I never did anything. That was part of my formula, was I didn't do anything that was structural. It was all just superficial. So it was paint, floor, plumbing fixtures, light fixtures, nothing hardcore. I never opened a wall because I don't want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my formula. Same color on the walls. Kitchen was always yellow. Everything else was kind of a beige color, and ripped it out in like a week, 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
God.
sure enough, everything was going up well enough that I was able to sell it most times before I left town. So I made some good money doing that, and that was a lot of fun. 2008 comes around. I got stuck with one of those properties where the market turned that fast and I wasn't able to sell it. So it was a rental. And so that's my first experience as a landlord.
Wow.
And that sucked.
Yeah.
The income when it happened was cool.
Yeah, of course.
But it was intermittent, and my property manager was awful. I had to call him every single month, middle of the month. Hey, are we getting paid this month, or what's the deal? And It was just ridiculous. Couldn't change him. Couldn't find anybody else in town. I tried several times. It was just a major headache. It was actually cheaper for me to fly out there when the tenant changed. Cheaper for me to fly out there, do all the new paint and everything myself rather than hire anybody. So I did that. I'd come back and rent it out again and start the whole thing over. So it was a bit of a mess, and I didn't really enjoy it.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was just dumb. So then 2008, watching the TV and seeing all these banks going under and all this craziness going on, and just going, so now what? What does this mean? And it wasn't very long after I was contacted by a friend of mine, Corey, who's from Calgary, who'd moved down to Southern California, and he met up with a group of investors that had got caught in this same issue, where they'd bought 60 properties, mostly Midwest, and they were supposed to just flip it out, and the market changed fast enough that they couldn't. The deal fell through, so they got stuck with these 60 properties. They had no idea about the houses. They really didn't know anything about real estate. They're in Southern California. Everything else is in the Midwest. So it's just a mess. And then market's just going crazy. So they said to him, listen, whatever you can do it. So here's a couple of Canadians. Figured we had invented seller financing because we've never heard of it. It doesn't really happen in Canada. It's almost completely unheard of.
Is it legal to do?
It's legal and you can, but just nobody does. And I'm not quite sure why, but it's just not a thing. So yeah, we thought we'd kind of invented it and kind of made it up as we went along. Our first set of contracts were just horrendous. But then I was doing some internet research one day and I saw something, I don't even remember how it popped up, but something from Eddie Speed talking about seller financing, and what he was describing was exactly what we were doing. And I thought, somebody else does this? Like, this is a thing? So I went down to Houston, took his first class, his whatever introductory course that was. I wasn't at the time, I wasn't interested in joining his group, but the information was fantastic, and it really helped us to kind of redo our contracts and in a way that made sense to be able to resell. And then I went to that note conference and met some more people, and Donna Bauer is one of them, and she was a great mentor for quite some time, where she actually, when it came time to sell the land contracts that we'd made in Columbus, Ohio, the other people that I had met all bailed. Donna was the one that said, let's make it work. And we made a deal, a couple of different deals with her, actually. So she was great. But that's kind of how it got rolling. And then
what year was that, you think?
That was about around 2010 is when we started doing that. So 2009, I think, was the conference. And then 2010, started selling some of these contracts that we'd created. And then it was also in 2010, I met Jack.
Yep.
And Jack was talking to me about this non-performing stuff. And I thought, oh, that's way too risky. I don't know, man. So he and I chatted for a while, and he convinced me to buy a set of 3 notes from him for a total of $10,000, all in Columbus, right where I was already. Yeah. And two out of the 3 of them worked out really well, and more than paid us back and then some. And then that last one we lost at a tax sale, but we chose to let it go.
Wow.
Which was empowering, just to figure out that, oh, I can do that. I'm not directly responsible for that. And I'd made back my money, so no loss, not a big deal. Anyway, it was fascinating.
Was from like Granite, or who they come from before him?
They must have come from Granite. That's where everything came from back then.
Yeah, shout out to Chaz out there.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I tell a lot of people beginning, if you're looking to get money or looking to get whatever, go to local RIAs, and if you're a landlord at all, just share your landlord stories.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I did. I mean, I was a landlord, and I had trouble tenants, and one called the health board on me when she was lying, and I couldn't evict, and it was just like, this is not what the book says.
No.
This isn't what I read. I'm supposed to be making killer money, and it just doesn't make sense.
People are supposed to pay every month. What's going on?
Yeah. Like, just, she would call me about the small stuff, and it was not worth me hiring, whatever it was, contract for this. It was like little electrical problems of the GF5 popped, and like, what? And it was one of the situations where it just didn't make sense anymore.
So when was this? When were you?
2010, I think it was, because it was 2008 when I got the phone call from my friend Jack saying, like, listen, I'm flying back. I'm going to stay at your house for a little while, and I'm going to figure myself out. I'm moving to New York. And then he moved to New York and worked for DBI and stuff.
Okay.
And I got to a conference with him about talking short sales. Now, I knew rentals. I knew short sales were a thing. Didn't understand them. And then we went through the legal process, which helped me in the note space to a point, because I understood more things. And realizing what was going on. And when he transitioned out of DBI and go on his own is when I sat down in a room with him, and he said, listen, I'm going to show you what I'm doing. I need your help. I need to evaluate loans. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? We sat down, we looked at assets, lists of thousands. And he just said, give me values. I said, well, how do I know the values? And smart man, he knew the fact that the price was so cheap back then, it didn't matter how off you were. And we started looking at stuff. And I didn't believe it. I didn't understand it, didn't believe it, didn't make sense. Like, it's just weird. And I can imagine what newer investors go through with that mindset of, like, wait a minute. Being the bank sounds like a really good sales line.
Right.
And it's what you are, but it doesn't correlate. Like, I'm a brick and mortar owner. I have a property. I own a paper. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We understood mortgages are around. I was paying one. But owning the mortgage, boy, that doesn't make sense at all. And why would they sell? And all these kind of little questions that I'm sure people have. And then I said, 2010, I went up to his office and we jumped on some stuff. I watched some phone calls with some of his employees at the time. Some people are still involved with the space, everything else. And I said, okay, this sounds like a legit thing. So I was doing due diligence with our good friend Tim and reevaluating the stuff, and Jack was buying it. Wasn't involved in the due diligence period of title and research stuff. I was just in evaluations for 2 years. Okay. And then I said, listen, I got to buy. Yeah. I called our friend Mark and said, Mark, what do you got up for sale? I wasn't buying from Granite. There's still an asset that we wish we got from Granite, but we missed it. We ended up buying a property from Mark, who bought it from Granite. And we bought a package for $5,500, 2 loans, one for like $500, the other for $5,000. And we were involved. Yeah. And that's when it started. Even though we were doing all this due diligence, evaluation of properties, we had no clue what we did next.
Yeah.
We knew values, right? And we get this collateral file, not knowing what's inside of it. We shipped it off to, I think, Madison at the time and said, listen, here we go. Tell me what I got to do. And they turned around and said, we can't tell you what to do. That's not our job. But I liked it because I didn't like the landlord part of it, of the experience I had. And I think if you get one tenant that's great, it looks awesome. Mm-hmm. If you buy a pool of rentals, it kind of weighs it out. But buying a one-off loan was a lot different from buying a one-off rental property, because I wasn't maintaining it. I can do my other stuff or whatever I was doing, my day job, so that I can maintain it and just run as one asset.
Right.
And I can lean on people, right? And this community that we have together now wasn't around back then.
No.
We go to conferences, and I think my first conference was around 2011 or so. Mm-hmm. I think I met Joe. I probably met a lot of people we know now that we didn't realize who each other were.
Right.
Bill McCafferty, I remember meeting, he's like, I'm brand new, you're brand new, what are we doing? And then going through that process of buying that asset, and that $500 asset, we ended up, the funny story about that was the second didn't know they were a second, and they finally figured out they're a second. We had a deal in lieu, and the second wouldn't sell us off the second for cheap. So we actually released the lien on the $500 purchase we made, because the owner didn't even know they had the property. They were senile and everything else. Okay. And we turned around and says, wait a minute, let's release the lien and get out of this whole situation, because the house is going to be torn down and whatnot. And the other property was in Columbus, Ohio. Sandusky, I'm sorry. One of them. Sandusky. And it was, we bought $5,000. We sold for like 32. I think it was like, we forgot taxes. We made like $4 or $5,000, but we were ecstatic that we made money.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And we jumped in more. Yeah. So that was the beginning of it. And going to the conferences, I was scared. Even though I was tagging along with someone that was in the space bigger, talking to people and just not knowing what to say, how to talk was scary.
Yeah.
If you guys are listening and you've been in that situation, feel free to post questions, whatever. I think for me, going to the conferences gave me, once I got over that fear, it gave me the energy to go to them and just talk to anyone there.
Right.
No matter what level they're at.
Yeah. And again, you get in there and you start talking to people and you figure out, oh, there's not really a lot of ego here. And people are willing to talk to you no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And how many deals you've done or not done. And it's really not a big deal, and people will just chat with you, because the more you go along, you realize there's so much more to learn, and everybody's got something to offer. So
the trade secrets are the fact that what your knowledge of one certain thing is, and your returns. Really, that's it. There is no quote unquote secrets to this stuff. It's what return do you need, having capital, and like what angle you're playing on it, right? Your partial angle, this angle, that angle. And those angles are special, but that's just knowledge and experience in doing it. We all have the angle of knowing notes. You go out there. I think back when 2015, they gauged around 5,000 people nationally doing notes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's probably 20 or 30, but in a country of 300 million plus, we're a very small group.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see that. When you first got started, when you first got the collateral package, what'd you do with it? What's your wife say? Like, what the hell is this thing?
I was going to ask you the same thing. So what I did, I got this packet from Jack, and I start looking at it. I'm like, holy smokes, I get all this information on this person? Like, that doesn't seem right. I'm like, I've got a copy of their social security card, their driver's license, all this stuff. I'm like, am I allowed to look at this? I know. No. Yeah, I am. I'm the bank. No. Yeah, I'm the bank. Yes, I definitely have, the right and the obligation even to have this information. What I did is I opened it up on my desk and I just went through page by page.
Wow. Yep.
And it was a great file to start with because it had copies of collection letters.
Really?
Yeah, which is not super common. But yeah, all kinds of like everything. So it was great that I could just go through and page by page look at it and say, oh, okay, so then this happened. Oh, and then they got this letter, and put yourself in that guy's shoes and like, oh, so how are they feeling right about now? Where the last thing is, pay or else kind of thing. And it was really interesting. Like, if you remember back then, banks were like trying to help people out. So it was ridiculous. Like, it was, $50,000 balance owing, and they were willing to take a payoff of $40,000. I'm like, well, obviously that's not going to work. Yeah. If they don't have 50, they don't have 40 either. And they're not going to just pay it off. So it was a nice gesture by the bank to give them a slight discount, but it was useless. And it was a one-time cash payment. It wasn't 40,000 on terms. It was, if you can pay us cash by the end of the month, then we're good.
They wanted money.
But it's just unrealistic. So that was great. Just go through page by page, and I could kind of piece together on each of the three files what the story was, how did they get to where they are, and why, and kind of taking everything into consideration. Yeah. And then what I did for those first three is I decided, and this is same in Columbus where we had all these properties, so I decided, okay, here's the angle is I'm going to try doing this deed in lieu thing I've heard about. where I can get them just to sign over the property rather than having to foreclose. So I was on site. I was in Columbus, and it took my buddy who's in Columbus, big dude that helped with all kinds of stuff down in town there.
That's amazing.
Just so I had a backup, and just knocked on the door and said, so here's who I am. Here's all the paperwork. I'm not here. That was my line, is I'm not here to collect any money. I'm actually here to kind of solve your problem. So if you're willing to sign the property over, this mortgage goes away and I will completely wipe it out. And it was the first guy we knocked on. He's like an old retired Army guy, and he's ready to go right then. My mistake was I didn't have a traveling notary with me, because they would have signed right then and there, but I didn't have the notary to sign it over. So then it took several weeks of going back and forth, and then they heard from a friend that they should get money out of this deal and all that. So we ended up doing cash for keys. The second girl we knocked on, it was the same kind of thing. She's, both of them, these were second properties where at the time it was easy to pick up a second income property that of course didn't work out. So this girl was on the other side of town, and knocked on her door, and she came to the door, and when I told her my spiel and everything, went through the whole thing, and I'm not here to collect any money, and she just broke down in tears, and she's like, are you kidding me? Don't mess with me on this one. Are you serious? You're going to just wipe it out? And I said, yeah, I just want the house. And she's like, oh, she was completely relieved.
You solved her problem.
Big time, which I hadn't considered that angle before, that I was helping her, like relieving her of this massive worry and debt and headache and burden. And that was a huge, again, kind of a light bulb moment, and going, oh, I'm not a bad guy here at all. I'm definitely a problem solver. I'm helping them to solve their problem. Yeah. Something that they desperately want to solve. And that was a huge
I never
thing.
could figure out why the bank would sell it to us for, back then, guys, this is not today's dollar, 30 cents, 35 cents for first, 5 to 10 cents for seconds.
Yeah.
And the bank wouldn't even work with the borrowers to get a price that low at all. And they would sell it to us for that. I could never understood that when I got involved. So
Yeah,
it was
me too.
frustrating to see that kind of situation go on. When I first got the loan package, before I bought my first, wiring money, which I
Yeah.
didn't do before,
Yeah.
to somebody for this piece of paper that's supposed to give you money, I think my wife thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Luckily, Jack was like, "Don't, it's all good." And I knew the guy, I knew Mark, but just wiring money to some guy without an escrow agent or any of that kind of stuff
Yeah.
was crazy talk.
Yeah. Yeah. That was scary. That was scary. So what'd you do with that first file? Did you go through it, or did you
We
hand
went
it off to
through
somebody
it.
else?
I remember we had the file here because I didn't know where to send it first.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know what to do with anything to do with it. And I didn't know an attorney. I didn't know the servicer thing. I knew I had to send my servicing stuff to a servicer. But I think this package I didn't know the power of the package, right?
Yeah.
And I looked through it and I said, okay, what's this? I read through the mortgage. I didn't do the mortgage, no clue. I didn't understand it. And then I had 2 assignments in there plus mine. So I had 3 assignments. And I was working with my buddy and I said, listen, this doesn't seem like a difficult thing. Let's send this to the county records, record them all. I'll send a nice, pretty cover letter. We got the package back saying it's recorded, no problem, completely out of order.
Oh, shoot.
I call up and I called Madison and said, listen, how do you guys do this? Well, you have to, label it. I label it, still wrong. So now I pay for 2 shipping charges, 2 finally sent to Madison. I'm going to send a collateral file to you guys. You do it. But as I looked through the collateral file, I didn't know what I was looking at. I had no clue. Today, I'd probably go back and, I couldn't even think today what I was thinking at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember getting the collateral file. I put it in my house for a while. I reviewed it, and I just didn't understand it. And I said, listen, I'm just going to keep going forward. And I knew the fact that the asset was a foreclosure. We were going through it. It was a small house. And we said, listen, we don't really want the house. And because I didn't want to rehab. My partner at the time wanted to. He does a lot of it now. But we were insured. And of course, at the tail end of the story is we ended up burning the file because we were so ecstatic about what we did, not knowing we should and shouldn't. But when we had this file in our hands, it was what they tell everybody how powerful, how great it is. We didn't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We just look at numbers and said the numbers work. And when these things do something for us, going to the foreclosure process for us was probably annoying to the attorney. Because every week we're emailing, hey, what's the newest? What's stated? What's stuff? We didn't know the steps. We didn't understand the process. Send that thing out, the demand letter. Okay, we're good, right? No, we have to file less pendants on it. Like, what word is that?
Yeah.
And I knew from short sale, that's what, the first step of it, getting it started and foreclosure. But I didn't understand it was a legal step.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Googling Liz pendants. What's that?
Yeah.
Now?
The first time you Google it, you spell it wrong. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
man, what?
Yeah.
No
idea.
So getting started and then connecting people and, as far as I get into the space, the more I get into it, the less I feel like I know, the less I understand. And the more I'm like, whoa. I mean, we've had people on here to go, Tom telling us angles of buying quarter payments and quarter yield. Blow your mind.
Yeah.
And I think for those who are watching today, it's okay to feel lost. It's okay to ask questions and ask them multiple people. Don't ask just one, right? Walk around the crowd and ask the question to everyone. What do you do? What are the angle? Here's my situation. What do you think? Because everyone has a different angle, different thought process.
Yeah.
For me, things started juicing up. In 2015, I was out at Paper Source, or Noteworthy, one of them, and someone said, listen, why don't you start a meetup locally? And I did. And I started doing that kind of stuff. And I found, because I'd gone to, Mike Rasica had a meetup local, and it just phased out. And I said, okay, I'm going to start my own. And then I brought on people. I think my first interview was pro title, and I had Zoom, or I didn't have the full version and all that stuff. And I got through the process of connecting. And my little Facebook group that was designed for New Jersey, East Coast, ended up growing. And people across country, hey, can we tune in and listen to whoever I had on? And that's how it went crazy. And the people locally were asking a lot of questions. We had a lot of solved issues, but we think that we had hopes and dreams. Right. So we thought that with everything going on, we would think that we would be a good connection. But we found out later it wouldn't be as good.
Okay.
So, but a couple of people out there, I learned, I think, just as much from everyone there that I did here. So for those who are listening, going out to local RIAs, talking to other real estate people is key, right? Because you're going to learn those kind of things.
And then, you get a sense of what you would prefer. And so much of this is about your preference.
Yes.
So figure out what your preference is.
Comfort zone. First, second, CFDs, rentals, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So you still have your 9 to 5.
Yep.
So how did you go from 9 to 5 employed guy to a business entrepreneur?
Mornings, nights, weekends, between between the hours, cell phone, and just making it work, because the idea that was all around me was, if you don't, you're not keeping up, right? Because I wanted to be part of this group, and then if I wasn't doing it, I'm not part of it. So it became more of I had to get to the next level.
Okay.
And be part of these people and be part of this group. And if I sat down and watched TV or whatever I was doing, I'm not making it. So I drove myself.
Okay. So yours was more of a kind of a keeping up with the Joneses kind of a thing. Yeah. Interesting.
What made you go from what you're doing to full-time notes? What was your driving force?
It's really interesting. I've never had a regular 9 to 5. Before I started doing real estate, we owned a couple of fitness franchises, Curves, and that was kind of my real job before I started doing notes. And then when the economy changed, people don't go to the gym when money's tight, so that kind of went down the tubes. But for me, it was just kind of a mind shift of just thinking about business in general, and going from, my dad was a teacher, and so that's kind of what I grew up with. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so that was kind of my view on the world is dad goes out and works, mom stays home, and it's a 9 to 5 thing, and like that's it. And my parents would talk about money all the time, and about how we can't afford this, and money's tight, da 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 da. So that was kind of my blueprint growing up. And so for me, it was a major shift. It was actually my wife's brother. So my brother-in-law he's semi-retired right now, but he was kind of our business mentor, where he said, well, you know what, why don't you start by reading some of these books? And so he got us into a couple of different books to read, and that's really what kind of changed my mind and went, oh, like when you're a kid, when somebody says you can do whatever you want to do. And then I was like, oh, I really can do whatever it is I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I started kind of putting that together. What is it what do I want to do then? And started putting that together.
When, as we progress in the group, and I think we do have a small group that we keep in touch with. I think that was 2015, 16 time frame where we put that together. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to a good friend of mine and hearing about this thing called a note MBA.
Yeah.
And I highly doubt Robbie's listening or Chaz, but I'm chasing. But I wasn't a big podcast person, but I was on the road a lot. I said, let me just tune into it. And it was like talking with my friends, or with Jack or Tim or whatever, and about notes, and just hear these guys ramble.
Yeah.
about scenarios, deals, understanding. And I said, whoa, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it tuned into it because it was the traction of what they were talking about. They were talking about deals that are falling apart, deals that they're succeeding at. And they're real, right? And that's what I think attracted me the most to that podcast that lasted 2 years. That was the only one around. It was the reality of it. So, guys, I encourage you guys, go back. Everyone listening, watching, go back and check out the No MBA. There's some that are still available. It's just the rambling and Robbie's characteristics and stuff like that was really cool. That podcast kind of jump-started me to say, listen, I got to do more. I got to get involved more. And if we look back, I'm sure we wish we bought more notes back then and whatnot. Was there podcasts you were listening to encourage you to keep moving?
That was a big one, and I like to read books, but at the time there were no books.
Yeah.
So the podcast was a really good one.
Yeah.
And just to tune in and see what other people are doing and some of the guests they had on and stuff as well. And just to kind of hear about what was going on and what other people are doing and what they're not doing and all that sort of thing. That was very, very useful.
Yeah, it was a great job. Those two together worked out well. Robbie's personality and everything else. But I think for me, the podcast became someone I can listen to that understand what I understood on a weekly basis. I can relate to when I'm in the car riding or whatever.
Yeah.
The only book that I remember reading back then was Invest in Debt, Jim Napier.
Yeah.
That was a generalization of what was going on. And around that time, I wanted to invest in debt. I think, and of course, for all watching, listening, we're skipping over Rich Dad Poor Dad. We all know that book's around. Everyone in their mother's read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So we're going to skip over Rich Dad Poor Dad and move to more of the driven books of notes.
Yeah.
So, a lot of books came out over the years, and there's one that just came out recently I don't think it's actually out in the stores yet. They actually interviewed us from it. But we got a couple of those books, and the angles these people looked at, just different deal scenarios and understanding. Some stuff was duplication, but just understanding it. So between YouTube videos, books, podcasts, I was able to kind of network without networking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and so I brought up from my bookshelf a couple of these. So this was the one where I read where because I came from a house flipping background, I was always in and out, in and out, in and out. And so, and that's still how I've run notes so far, is just in and out.
Yep.
So when I heard about seconds, I'm like, I don't get it. You can't get in and out on a note.
No.
On a second. So why would you even do that? And then I got Gordon's book.
Yeah.
And I read that and I'm like, oh, I get it now. That's why people would be attracted to seconds. It's not what I would prefer, and it's not, my way of doing things, but I get it now. I understand why seconds are in the least bit attractive. And so that was a big one for me.
I'm not a big,
Foucault's book was the follow-up to that.
Yeah. I'm not a big book person because I'm usually on the road or I'm busy. I don't relax enough. It's usually a book to read on vacation, really.
Yeah.
And then we were at a conference and we learned about self-direct IRAs.
Okay.
What is this? There wasn't a lot of books out there about it. I don't think there is really good book self-directed besides the older ones out there, Invest in Debt and stuff like that. But learning from that, so guys, if you're a visual person, YouTube's great. If you can read, you can do podcast.
Yeah.
There's all different methods of getting knowledge besides just getting on social media and asking questions and going to conferences.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to my first conference, and I thought one of my first conferences, actually, Paper Source, whatever it was, and I remember myself saying, I'm going to spend like $1,500, $2,000 to go to this conference. Man, this is not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And I have to honestly say, there's every conference I've been to, I do not regret any of the dollars I've spent going for whatever reason.
Or the time.
No. You feel bad, your family's home, yes. Yeah. But once I'm there, it's like going to the gym and working out, you feel great when you're there. but
Yeah.
you always come away with something, right?
Yeah.
I think, Paper Source, we're in Vegas. Well, I flew home with Nathan.
Yeah.
Spent 2 hours BS in the airport that I had not spoken to before. And
Right.
that experience allowed me to learn things about how he did things. And now I look back at my email. I think one of my first emails with Nathan was back in 2013. I
Yeah.
probably have some stuff back in my Gemini days, my email, but that connection wasn't made. But once you go to the conference, you sit down and have lunch with somebody or talk with them, that connection has.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a ton coming up soon too, guys. We'll be having some of the people presenting the conferences later in August. That we're going to talk about those things. And each different conference is geared for a different population of people. Right?
Yes.
Can you attend IMM? You can, but if you're a beginner, you're not going to grab. It's not going to be as good for you.
It's
go
honestly
to a
not worth
DME.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And certain conferences are lower level where they're geared for certain tracks, or financing, whatever. So we're going to have a couple of these guys on in the few weeks coming up.
And they do different topics as well.
Yes.
Like you say, like an IMN is actually usually they're pretty specific. There's one coming up about non-QM, so the non-qualified mortgage space. If you're brand new to the space, that's probably over your head, and it's not a dig. That's just it just is. So it's not worth it. Don't bother.
So just to give an example, me and Nathan were at the IMN in Miami, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I sat down with somebody, feeling confident. I'm going to talk to him. It ended up being someone I actually knew, just didn't know the name of it. And they're like, yeah, we did, we spent $300 million last month on assets.
Yeah.
What? Like, I can't even intertwine that, right? That's something that I can't even appreciate.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, hey, I can learn from this person. I'm not blowing person-wise. Let me sit down and talk. And I talked. They were cordial. They were friendly. And walked on, right? I'm not going to sit there and ask him a million questions because it's just not fair to him and his time. He's dealing with other people.
Right.
They're buying from Fannie and Freddie and all that good stuff. So they're just not intertwining that stuff. But I also sat down with somebody that I emailed before with and didn't know who they were and got that knowledge. Or you learn something from somebody. I remember sitting down with Dave, I can't remember his name, and you're like, oh, wow. And he found out about my day job. I was like, what do you do? And the personal connection you make. So I get the fact you're new, going to a conference may not fit you yet. But I think getting to them is good. I know Ray asked conference recommendation for total newbies. DMEs, we'll be talking DME coming up. That's a great one for beginners, right? They have some higher level stuff, but also some stuff that's on your playing ground, right? Introductional stuff. Note Expo, Paper Source, you can get something from them. It's the higher level that meant for funds that are just geared. And I can tell you can figure out who is your level or not, but if you don't understand the words inside the definition of the conference, it's not for you. It's not.
Right. That's exactly it.
So what jump-started you to go from one asset to higher? Like what, you got into one asset. A lot of people, 1 or 2 assets are done. They're out of it. What helped you get up there?
Going from, again, it's kind of a progression. Like I bought that package, those 3, and I went, oh, wow, this is a thing. So I started anytime anything would come up in Columbus, and I stayed focused in Columbus for quite a while there.
Good Lisa.
Yeah. And anything that came up in Columbus, I was all over it. And I knew the city really well.
Yep.
So I could tell, not just zip code, I could tell you the street. So if it's on Hudson, you're okay. If you're down on Cleveland, not so much, and I could tell you, block by block, where's the good areas and everything. So that worked really well, especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
Going forward, it's really interesting. Going forward, and then I started working for another hedge fund for a little bit.
Yep.
Which I didn't enjoy nearly as much. It wasn't nearly as fun. It was a lot of sales, and that's just not really my thing. So I went from that, and I was just kind of in confusion and just not sure what I was going to do and what's happening next and all this sort of thing. And I knew I really liked notes. I didn't have any money of my own to invest. This is about 2014, 15.
Okay.
And it was actually, I was getting frustrated enough with just everything that was going on that I considered leaving notes altogether.
Yeah. We've been there. We've all been there.
Yeah. I've got a friend who works for Royal Bank of Canada and as a mortgage lender. And so I said, you know, I understand mortgages. It's not very different from what I'm doing already. Maybe I should just do that. So he lives in a town halfway between here and Toronto. So my wife and I, and he and his wife had just moved into a new place, and they're like, "Oh, come and see." And we're like, "Sure, yeah, whatever." We were on our way to Toronto anyway. So we stopped in, and both of us were just kind of frustrated with everything. And we're like, do we stop? Do we not? You know, we're not really in the mood for this kind of thing, whatever. And I'm like, no, I got to at least talk to him.
Yeah,
and see, of course. You know. So we get off, and he's there, and he's super friendly and everything else. And he's like, "Oh, let's go for dinner." I'm like, "Sure. You're paying? Sure." That sounds good.
Yeah.
So we go out, and I just kind of started unloading a little bit on my frustrations, and just it was just bothering me, and I don't know what to do next, and I'm not really sure. And kind of halfway gearing up to say, you know, he had offered before. He's like, "If you want to get into the lending space for the bank, let me know." And so I was kind of leaning that way. And then he goes, I kind of vented for a bit, and he says, "Okay, so then what do you want to do then? Like, what do you want to do?"
Yeah,
and I just kind of, I couldn't answer. Like I was.
I can tell you what I don't want, but what I want is hard.
So I was totally dumbfounded. So we ended up spending the night there at his place, and off to Toronto the next day. And my wife, who's fantastic, the kids weren't with us or anything. It was perfect. And she got out a piece of paper and pencil and said, "Okay, so what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Okay, if I was going to do this, if I'm going to keep going in notes, this is what I do." And I started just detailing it. I said, well, I would start by teaching people, because I don't think anybody's going to give me money until they understand the business.
Yeah.
And started going into that, and because I knew it well enough.
Yeah.
Started teaching people, and I would offer a class, and this is how I do it. And you know, I'm not interested in mentoring, but I would do it this way and that way, and and just like for the next 4 hours, just kind of detailed and said, so I would do it this way and that way and this way and that way. Once I get people to trust me enough to give me money, then I would go and do this and and just kind of point by point and said this. So this is what I would do. And it's really a shame that we didn't hold on to that piece of paper, because that's very extremely close to what I'm doing right now.
Wow.
So it was very much a planned set of ideas of what we're going to do next and put that into action.
My first JV partner, because I didn't have a lot of money myself, came from my meetup group. Besides my friends, Jack, the first person outside my closeness came from meetup group. They didn't know that my first JV, right? I faked it, made it to a point that I'd done a few deals, but I wasn't perfect. And their answer was, I just want to learn it. And the mentality going into it was, I don't care if I lose money here. I want to learn it. And just like college, I spend money to learn, and I want to learn.
Yeah.
Didn't go well. I learned a whole lot. So did he. We're still friends, which is cool. But because he had a lot of knowledge about a lot of stuff. Older gentleman, Kevin, just awesome, knowledgeable guy. And when I found becoming a JV partner with this guy, those who you like, right? Those who you work well with together, you get closer to, and you start talking more, and you spend time with them more. Yeah. But I would go to these RIAs and share I'm no longer a landlord, I'm a lien lord kind of edge, and people were attracted to it. And you'll find people wanting to learn more about it based on that knowledge. I think for me, that made a lot of sense.
It was the same thing. I put together actually 3 different meetup groups, one in Montreal, one in Ottawa, one in Toronto. And I would just kind of do the tour, and I would kind of give my spiel about, so this is what notes are. And by the end, I usually actually had somebody asking me, okay, so what do you want from us then? And I said, well, actually, that's my next slide, you know? I can either teach you how to do it, or you can give me your money and I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at how many people took option 2.
Yeah.
For myself, I've always been a do-it-yourself kind of guy, so I always figured that's how people were going to go. But so I was floored when people said, "Well, no,
You
I don't want
never
to learn."
underestimate what people want because of what you would want.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of borrowers that way too. Like,
yeah,
why would a borrower do that? Don't talk about why.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. And surprises come along the way. We look back and you forget about assets you've had. You have all these stories. What I think is different from being in a fund level is you have the individual stories of people. I remember getting on a phone call with borrowers like you do and having that talk and like making it real. You're like, whoa, like, and this person, like, I felt bad. I could not do anything with the loan. There was nothing I could do. Yeah. Couldn't afford the house anymore. Yeah. And that hurt. Yeah. But it was like, listen, this has been a burden to you. There's nothing I can do to make this work for you. And she's, thanks for being honest.
Yeah.
And that personal situation is interesting. I don't encourage everyone to talk to the borrowers, but as you get through it, you can definitely reach out to talk to them because you want to more what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So I think moving forward, those who are still listening and all that stuff, make sure you check the YouTube channel and hit the bell and all that stuff. I got a message from my trade desk to make sure you hit that notification bell and whatever on YouTube. We do an event on Facebook group every week. The next couple of weeks are going to be heavy material. Next week, I don't even know if I'm going to describe what we're doing next week. I would just encourage everyone, if you can set your alarm clocks, bells, whatever you got. I guess we can talk about. We're going to talk about debt licenses.
Yeah.
For note collectors nationwide. So, what does that mean? Certain states require you to have a license to own a note and to collect debt on it. Some states don't. Some states require a bond. We're going to have someone on that is a specialist in this space. So make sure you tune in next week. It's going to be a lot of material, a lot of information. We are not going to go deal specific. We're going to talk generalities. But it's going to be a treat.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
What do you see in 6 months?
I still think we're headed to a whole bunch of foreclosures. I know the government is trying desperately to avoid that.
Yep.
And I get it. I understand why. That's a lot of voters. But it's unavoidable. And whether that's October 3rd or whether that's December 3rd or January 3rd, it doesn't matter. It's coming. And it's a hard situation, and it is not easy, and there's got a lot of people that are going to be in a lot of trouble, which is why we're here. And that's, as entrepreneurs, that's what we do, is we help solve problems. And so I, as much as I'm not looking forward to the pain and hurt that a lot of people are going to go through, I know that I can be part of the solution. So I'm looking forward to that part of that.
The fact that, as I'm sure you guys don't know, my wife's in medical. She's had a rampant case of COVID shooting back up. So just be knowledgeable that this may come back where September, October, and the government can't solve this forever. I'd be very curious to see what happens. My guess is once the government stops supporting this situation by money-wise and bailing people out right now, about 6 months later is when things are going to go haywire. Yeah. Because banks won't be able to loan money out on delinquent debt, right? There's a whole talk. And if you don't know about it, I'm sure we have a video or whatever we can always bring back up, that banks sell assets because they can't have defaulted assets on their books because they can't loan out more money. They can only have a certain amount of debt. So you have to let it out. And then what they do is they write off on their books, right? It's called charge off. It's accounting stuff. But when that happens, that's why I think a lot of people can't answer what's going to happen in 6 months. It's once that happens, that trigger happens, and let's go. I think that's when things are going to transpire. Yeah. We're going to see it. What's it going to look like?
Yeah. What kind of level are we looking at? That's hard to gauge. I don't think it's going to be a 2008 kind of a meltdown. But like I say, there's going to be unfortunately millions of people that are going to be
Yes.
in big trouble.
Yeah. And a lot of them may be landlords too.
Yep.
That the tenants aren't paying, they can't pay. We're going to see. It's going to be very interesting. So, guys out there, I hope this. I apologize, but I didn't really get into the chat feed. We're really. This is kind of like in your face, kind of open talk, kind of conference talk here that people share. Really, the reality, what we are. We're not people with thousands of loans in our belt, but we've dealt with a lot of assets and building around people that the collection of all of us will make us better, stronger people than anything else. So it's been a pleasure, guys. It's been fun. But I encourage everyone, make sure I'll set the event up probably pretty soon on the Facebook group, East Coast group, and make sure you tune in. I'll probably send an email out. If you have questions about that webinar, please send over. Again, we're not going to answer every question out there. We're going to let them talk. You're welcome, Amy. Guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Nathan, I appreciate you sharing with everyone and sharing with me your story. It's been an awesome time, man.
It's everybody's got a journey.
Yeah.
Get on and ride it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Nathan, reach out to myself, check out the YouTube channel, Facebook group, and our websites. So I appreciate it. Enjoy and take care.